Welcome to the Grappling Grappling Rewind Podcast.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind Podcast. On this week's show, we are going to recap the 2024 IBJJF Nogi GP that also had some gi matches on it. Next week, we are going to recap the Fight Pass Invitational that is actually happening after we record this show because we're recording on Sunday before that happens. Also going to recap ADCC trials for the South American trials, both the first trials and the second trials. That will be next week. So we're going to move those. As always on the show, I'm your host, Maine, my co-host.
Zach.
How you doing, Zach?
Pretty good. A little bit of allergies going on today, but...
Yeah. Just fed you a Zyrtec, and I was like, get to the show, show. You were like, okay, I'll be good.
Yeah.
So,
I turned down the meth.
Yeah. So we're going to, a little housekeeping before we get into the show. We had a ton of events we previewed last week, like Grapple Fest has happened, ADXC has happened. Not sure we're going to be able to get to ADXC in its entirety next week, but definitely on the docket for next week is both trials. Miranda and I are just going to run those back to back. It just seems like a better way to do it versus try to kind of do them 2 weeks in a row. We'll just run all finals next week and the Fight Pass Invitational because it literally hasn't happened yet, so Zach and I cannot recap it. Figure we would focus our efforts, do a little more breakdown on some of the GP matches because there was some interesting performances of note on kind of both the gi and the no-gi matches, so figure we do it that way. As far as news goes, I had news, and then I was like, we'll talk about this in the news section of the show. Mikey Musumeci, I think we talked about his under Cobrina now. He got his third degree. Yeah. He changes camps about every 2 years, so it's not super crazy. It is funny that Kennedy Masayal did win his trials, so he now is guaranteed a slot at ADCC. We'll break that down next week. I actually haven't had a chance to see the trials yet, but it is funny that Mikey comes to that camp. Kennedy immediately wins, so it is cool to see that happen. Yeah. He got his dad's spot in 2019, so it's cool to see him actually really legit earn his spot.
Yeah.
And it was obvious in 2019 he was deserving to be there, but it is cool to see him kind of run it back at trials and go, yeah, man, I still absolutely am on the level and can win a slot here on my own volition. So
yeah, there was a big question going into that ADCC whether or not Kennedy deserved to be there. I mean, we'd seen him perform well elsewhere, and so it wasn't out of bounds for that to happen, but then his performance at the Worlds was
like, oh yeah,
this makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of, whenever anybody gets an invite, there's always a little bit of well, it's not, or this or that. And usually, for the most part, ADCC has pretty good reason and rationale for anyone who gets an invite, and so deserves it. But it is cool to see him win that. That's all I got, man. I think we just move into the recap section of the show. So Zach has an order that he wants to run through that I was like, yes, let's do that. So Zach, where do you want to start for the IBJJF GP?
I think we're just going to do match order and run through the GP in order of matches. So start with the quarterfinals, head semis, do the final, and then we'll talk about the super fights afterward. I think that's a good way to do things. On a caveat, I am pretty happy with how we picked this last week. I'm not saying I got it almost all correct, but I did. So let's run it, Zach. What GP match do you want to? It's so weird. They had a whole gi undercard, and they had a bunch of gi super fights for a no gi. It was such a funny IBJJF is gonna IBJJF. I think we will. Some of these matches we will get into some of the. I think the best way to put it is the fuckery with the IBJJF rule set. But I thought it was a nice mix, though. I still like seeing some gi stuff. And
honestly, a lot. We'll get into it in a bit here. A lot of the team on Grappling Rewind was like, the gi matches might have been better than the no gi matches.
I think they were.
So it was again. I like the mix. I think Zach, you're more of a gi player, and you like to do more of the gi breakdown. But we'll start with the no gi. First match you want to run through.
Let's do Kaynan and Hasim Rida for.
Oh
yeah,
man.
Kainan's good.
How many points was he up?
14, I think.
And then the finish.
The finish, yeah. This was a show of force from Kaynan, and that's we know that Rida can pull off really impressive submission attacks, and if he gets moving on the aggression and develops some momentum early, he's a force to be reckoned with. But we've also seen in some of his matches that if he doesn't get that momentum initially, he can kind of struggle to catch back up.
He can kind of be just stifled almost completely. And it's one thing we talked about early in his that kind of middle of his brown belt career when we first started covering him into his black belt career. It's been a little bit of a consistent wrinkle, and we talked about it in the matchup last week. If Kaynan can literally do what Kaynan did here, that is a pretty proven way to beat Hasim Rida. I was really impressed. It was Kaynan was sitting. They were kind of starting that initial crowbar sweep, the double hand grip kind of crowbar sweep.
Oh, yeah.
He gets Hyson with over. Initially, I went, ooh, this might be like kind of the beginning of the end, because we know how good of a passer Kaynan is, and Rita has a very good guard game, but again, if you are going to stifle on top exactly like Duarte does and not let Hyson ever really get the armbar attacks going or the triangle attacks going from his guard, if you can keep his knees together exactly like Duarte did, it is a very consistent way to put up a match like this on a guy like Hyson Rita.
Yeah, and that I had it down as a John Wayne sweep, but crowbar is probably more appropriate, and maybe somewhere between a John Wayne and a crowbar. I don't know if you can really label the names that well, but so really impressive sweep. It looked almost effortless.
It looked like Hyson almost tried. He like forced Hyson to try to like go with it to try to like counter, and then Duarte's just underneath him with the grip and forces Hyson over the shoulders, and it's just, you see Hyson almost halfway through realize like, oh shit, I'm overcommitted here, and Duarte just kind of steps out the back and just immediately puts him down there.
And then we've seen Kaynan play this style of passing before, and it's sort of his go-to at this point. But also, I think the meta is overall changing this way. He was playing this very low headquarters and knee cut switching back and forth, but the headquarters that he was playing was not your traditional headquarters where you're sort of upright and squat down. He was very low with his hips. Like, he was almost hips to hips with the entire time. I mean, we saw him do this the entire tournament.
Yeah, the entire GP, this is how he was passing.
The same way, and it was a nice transition in knee cut. And, that's not anything unusual. That's what we see that over and over again. Headquarters and knee cut go back and forth, but
one thing I really liked about his knee cut is that he would beat the front side knee shield, and then he would knee cut almost all the way through where he had the knee cut, but he would leave his foot cupped under the top of the thigh so that the bottom leg of the person he was passing wasn't able to get mobile again, but he would sit and he would camp there until he was ready to flop through, and it was a really, really patient, again, it's what the top guys in the world do, and if you play with this position, you can see the merit of, a lot of times you don't immediately want to rush the pass because the opponent will get behind your hips and be able to wrestle you up. Yeah. But because Duarte is cupping and getting through the knee cut and then cupping his foot on the thigh, he can then choose when he knee cuts, and instead of needing to drive forward on the knee cut, he can just windshield wiper his leg and end up immediately in side control. And this is something that I've been playing with for a long time, and you're seeing it. I've saw it earlier at the lower weight classes because our guys are so mobile with their hips, and we've now seen it move all the way up into the higher weight classes with guys like Duarte.
And it was, and he also, Kaynan also, in addition to all of that, was really good about posting that outside leg, the plant leg. Yeah, the plant leg. Yeah. But he was posting that with an incredible amount of force. Like, he was really, really driving through that leg in every single one of these matches. And it was, that style of passing was displayed best against Rita. He was able to pass twice with that same knee cut, basically. The second time he passes, he moves straight to mount with it. Racks up a ton of points, end up, I think, 14 points up.
He sits in mount, and it looked like there was the same exact style of mount he played as what he played on Craig Jones, the ADCC finals, and the camera transition that IBJJF had was the exact same one. Basically, the angle that we had in the stands for that match, and I was like, this is deja vu all over again. It's just him camped in this position.
Yeah. And it was a slow grind up to the arm triangle.
But IBJJF will give you that time. They'll give you forever. If you're I think at IBJJF, they're not going to call you for activity in dominant positions.
Oh, no. Yeah. And it was okay. It was fine. And I don't think there was anything wrong with the slow grind up there. It was the smart thing to do. Kaynan is incredible at staying in mount and working his way up to those things. I was just more pointing out because it had to be brutal for Rita, honestly.
Because Rita's got his hand trap over his head the entire time, and you're watching Duarte just, again, slowly crawl up, and you're like almost like at not a speed, just like he's just there and he's fatiguing the arm. If you ever had your hand or arm trapped above your head for any length of time, by 30 or 40 seconds, like the muscle's screaming, and there's no arm muscle left, and so Duarte takes another probably minute after that. Locks the head in, and then just like crushes and finishes. And it was
a brutal finish. Real show of dominance from Kaynan there.
Too.
And
doesn't even sit off, just is up on. And we're seeing a lot more of the guys at the highest levels elect to not make the transition over across. So I had to I taught this a couple weeks ago in our club, and I showed both like the way from mount, and then I said like most of the guys who are not as good at this will have to. I showed them falling off to the side, and it's cool to see a lot of the guys at the top level. Like the meta has now become, I can just finish this in mount.
Yeah, you'll see. I mean, it's rare that guys have to transition over, and I think that's what it is. It's can I finish this in mount because it's safer and more dominant there, and then if I have to transition because someone is defending or because the positioning was not proper in the first place, then you see the transition to the side, but everyone at that level is no longer needing to do that because we've grinded it out. In this particular case, we see Kaynan exhaust Rina entirely to the point where he doesn't need to adjust the position in any way.
And I just think that's been an interesting kind of meta shift that we've seen in the last, probably 4 years, not since, not that many years, but guys were falling off to the side probably 4 years ago. Nowadays, most of the top guys are not doing that.
I mean, 4 years ago, we weren't seeing a lot of arm triangles anyways.
And MMA, but that was about it. Yeah.
MMA.
So, very extremely dominant match.
Yep.
I do not know if these guys two are in the same division at ADCC, if Rita gets another invite. Like, I do not know what he will have to change in his game to be able to get around a guy like Kaynan.
They probably wouldn't be same, though, right? Because Kainan's probably going in at minus 99 again, and Hasim would be plus 99.
Oh, he was minus.
Yeah.
He was only plus. I always flip that Duarte is plus, but I forget that he was plus 99 and then moved to under 99 and did the swap with Gordon. And if that in my head, I always forget that he switched to divisions there.
Yeah.
Because he was with Craig last time when Craig was under 99. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so they probably wouldn't because Hasim would still probably be at plus.
I can't imagine Hasim getting to minus. I could see Kaynan going up to plus again, but...
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. So, super dominant match. Next match you got,
Next
Zach.
match was Dante versus Elder Cruz. Dante Leon, Elder Cruz. This was a good showing for Dante. Not incredibly dominant in the way that we saw Kaynan in the previous match, but... Dante put on a really nice show, and especially when entering the leg entanglements. And I'm not sure that this was, overall overarching sentiment from the match. I'm not sure if this was Dante showing that he has improved on the leg entanglements significantly, or if it was sort of showing a bit of a gap in Elder Cruz's armor.
I think we've always kind of known that Elder has been a little susceptible. I mean, look at the finals match for trials. Like, that was Jacob Couch going to legs. Jacob Couch is specifically very, very good at the leg locks that he uses, the entry he used there against Elder Cruz. But we've known Dante was a really, really good leg locker for a long time, and he's sort of moved away from it in the last couple of years. So him moving back to it here, maybe even getting heel hooked by Pato a couple weeks ago, maybe kind of reinvigorated, like, all right, I've got to get back into this thing that was a very sharp tool in my game. It was an interesting contrast to the match we saw against Pato where he lost his title for 55 at who's number 1 to this match, moving back against Elder Cruz, who I think was a little bigger, and also Elder Cruz plays that Pedro Mourinho style of distance management where very non-committal and will hang out that knee cut pass range, but just out of it and force the guy to wrestle up. And so a lot of those leg lock entries will come off of that range because you really can't wrestle up because Cruz is powerful enough to put you back down. And Leon can then enter the legs, which has been a shown weakness for Cruz.
Yeah, and I think early in the match we saw Cruz trying to play a little bit tighter with the passing. He was playing inside passing a little bit more, and then Dante got a good bite on a leg, entered into a heel hook, and this was one of the sillier parts of the reffing. This was a case where I don't think it was necessarily I don't think it was a bad rule. I think it was a bad call. Elder Cruz rolled out of the mat. It looked super intentional to me. Maybe it was the angle. They didn't think that Dante had a good enough bite on the heel hook to call it a submission attempt, but it looked like Elder Cruz was in a heel hook and he rolled off the mat to get out of it, and there was no points awarded where in the rules there's supposed to be points awarded for that situation. It was supposed to be a DQ.
So we'll get into we're going to get into it throughout the thing. We're kind of openly not a huge fan of the IBJJF rule set. I think especially from a spectator perspective, it's one of the worst rule sets from a spectator perspective. There were a bunch of calls here. I think most of the calls were correct for the IBJJF rules as the rules are written for IBJJF.
Yes.
We've been watching a lot more ADCC recently. I think ADCC has a universally better rule set for the athletes and for the way that it pushes the action and the way that they manage the action. So that's informing a lot of, like, we've watched ADCC do such a good job recently and looking at the IBJJF that has kind of really failed to modernize a lot of these rules, I think a lot of our commentary is very biased for that, but I think most of the calls on the weekend were good. It just kind of highlights, again, we have another organization at the highest level in Nogi that does it differently and we think does it much better. And IBJJF, a lot of times, so this particular sequence, there's a bit of a gray area because in the IBJJF, if you escape the mat in a submission and it is deemed that you are intentionally fleeing the mat to get out of the submission, you're disqualified. If you go off of the mat in a submission, your opponent is awarded 2 points.
And somehow neither of those things happened here.
Yeah. So so it's a weird, like, it is, IBJJF has a lot of things that are, and all grappling rule sets do, unfortunately, that are judgment calls. I don't think this was the correct judgment call. It's like Dante should have gotten something for this.
Well, there's also a third layer here where almost submissions get an ad.
Yeah.
And like there's an opportunity to say, okay, well, by the time that they had rolled out of bounds, Dante no longer had the heel hook. And that's possible because we couldn't really see.
Camera angles, again,
camera angle was tough.
All GPs for IBJJF for hit and miss frequently.
Yeah. So with the camera angle, it was hard to see if on the rollout that the heel hook was still there. That said, the camera angle was good for the initial application of the heel hook, and it was there. And so it was there at one point. If there was an escape and then they rolled off the mat, then that should be an ad for
the heel hook.
Which also didn't happen. So it was just wild that nothing happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was such a weird call, and I don't know what was happening. But after that, then Elder Cruz started playing very far away, very cautious lateral passing, if you could even call it that.
I wouldn't even say I mean, he wasn't even really trying to pass, I don't think. He was trying to distance manage, and then in the last 30 seconds would hit the gas and try to basically score his points. And that was, he moved back to that strategy that we've seen him use very frequently, and you could tell, okay, he's not going to do anything else in the match unless Dante gives it to him or gives him an opportunity, and Leon probably won't give him that opportunity. So the rest of this match will probably be this sort of distance with Elder burning time on the clock, which again, I'm never going to fault the athletes for the way they play the rules. It's just from a spectator perspective, it's maybe a little less interesting than I would like, but Elder has a methodology that wins him big tournaments, and this is how he does it.
Yeah, and that's fair. Except at this time, it kind of didn't, because with about a minute and a half left, 2 minutes, minute and a half left.
Something like that.
He did engage. Elder Cruz got close enough and actually kind of got maybe close to a pass, but Dante was able to push off and redirect Elder Cruz's weight in a way that got him into single leg X. He shifted to outside Ashi and then landed into the outside heel hook. And this time they were in the center of the mat in a way where, or close enough to the center of the mat where Cruz wasn't able to roll out. And so a nice finish from Dante.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't get the sub.
He gets an advantage.
He finally gets something for the heel hook attack.
And then they run out the time.
And Dante wins on advantages, which I think this match was very much kind of in Dante's realm most of the time, like the closer passing from Elder, but I was happy to see Dante win this match because he was the one putting up much more effort. I was thinking at ADCC, this would be clearly a Dante Leon match because of the initiative, and so it's.
I think in ADCC, they probably would just let him continue rolling off to the ends of the planet, and Dante would have finished that first heel hook. So.
Absolutely. So, but again, in IBJJF. So that's all I got for that match. Kind of, again, played out kind of exactly as we anticipated it last week.
Yeah. Moving on. Giancarlo Bodoni versus Patrick Gaudio. Another quarterfinal match. This one actually had a lot more action in it. I thought it was a reasonable match to watch. Bodoni looked aggressive and good at applying the aggression here. There were several sequences that were really interesting. Just initially, Bodoni's using this collar tie, which is something we see him do all the time, but he's using it to frustrate Gaudio quite a bit, and Gaudio bites on it.
Yeah.
And Gaudio actually kind of plants his elbow, his forearm on Giancarlo's shoulder, I think, honestly, just to block that heavy collar tie.
That's immediately what it looked like. Gaudio was like, all right, not again. Moved it up, and then because the timing on how he did it, I went, oh yeah, he's doing that not because he's looking to counter. He's just looking to stop it because he's annoyed with this. This keeps happening.
Which Giancarlo immediately took advantage of, shuck by, threw the arm by, got back to back body lock, got one hook in as Gaudio rolled through. And this was actually really, really nice response from Gaudio, and something that I love seeing, because Gaudio rolled through. Bodoni kind of stayed on the back a bit, but as they landed almost in like a traditional back mount kind of situation, except Giancarlo had only one hook in. Gaudio set off to the side, and then he hit like a traditional wrestling switch.
Yeah.
It was really, really nice application in like an unusual spot, but a nice application. He got in underneath Giancarlo's free leg, and then sat through to switch up. It was really nice, and that forced Giancarlo to stand, and then Gaudio got on a single, and nothing ended up coming of it. They went out of bounds and reset to neutral, but
the technique, the back and forth,
the
was really
technique
nice
was
to
really
see.
nice in this particular
I
instance.
like seeing, and we're going to see it a little later in some of the key matches, I like seeing that jiu-jitsu guys are more and more competent on the feet, especially the guys that are in the ADCC hopper, and we're seeing that bleed over into the IBJJF with like double legs coming back into the gi, and like we're seeing a resurgence of people being dangerous takedown threats, but also good combination scramblers in takedown sequences that will lead to their own takedowns. It was something we just didn't really see with any frequency a couple of maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It wasn't as common, and that that 2019 ADCC really changed the game pretty significantly.
Yeah. And so they're back on their feet, more heavy collar tie. For about 6 minutes, nothing super interesting happens. I did want to point out that it was nice to see, Giancarlo is still using that heavy collar tie, and then still trying to set up that shuck by, but he started switching it down to a single. So it was a nice progression of technique where, I've gotten the back body lock off this a couple times, and you're expecting the back body lock, so then he goes for the single, and then what he started doing was going for the single, and then trying to climb up to the back body lock.
It was a nice building sequence. Something
Yeah.
you see in MMA a lot, where you see kind of the strategy throughout the match changes based on like the reactions you're seeing from an opponent. And I like seeing that in jiu-jitsu, where it's like Giancarlo's been throwing the same thing, and then as Gaudio gets used to the reaction, Giancarlo kind of shows you the same thing, and then he switches up his timing or switches up his response to that and builds the match kind of in his favor and builds off of those techniques. It's really nice to see, and it's not something we see hugely frequently in jiu-jitsu.
It probably happens more often than we see directly. This was just a case where it was very obvious that one setup leads to a couple different solutions, a couple different executions, and Giancarlo was attempting all of them, and he never actually got the takedown off of it, but it is a nice thing to see happen. And then, so that happens for about 6 minutes, with just a lot of hand fighting. And then at one point, Gaudio sort of walks out of the mat, and Giancarlo is clearly pissed about it and talks to the ref and gets the penalty point for talking to the ref, which
is the dumbest rule ever.
Yeah.
We're not judo. The fact that you can't speak to the ref is just like the one I find one of like the most disrespectful things to the athletes.
But also watching some of the early days of jiu-jitsu,
I
get where the rule came from.
But
we could probably
maybe we can modernize it, or especially recognize that maybe this isn't an open tournament, that this is a specialty professional event. Maybe like communication with your referee is like okay now and again.
Yeah. So then now though, Bodoni is down a penalty point and has to start making some action happen. And so instead of continuing the hand fighting and takedown,
and he takes that personally.
Battle, yeah, right.
Essentially, I mean, it's kind of like Bodoni went, cool, okay, I'm not getting Brazilian here.
Right, exactly. And so he's down a penalty point now and is like, yeah, I'm not letting that happen. So he pulls guard, and then almost immediately after pulling guard, attempts a triangle. And then this is where I really liked watching Bodoni's aggression on chaining techniques together. This was a really nice sequence, and it ends up with Bodoni only ending up getting an ad for it, but there's a really beautiful sequence where he attempts the triangle. It looks like he checks down to the knee bar just ever so briefly, and when he checks down to that knee bar, Gaudio recognizes it right away, clears the foot, but then in that clearing the foot, Bodoni is able to use it to trip him a little bit, and then as he trips him, Bodoni scrambles up to a single, and then it looks like Gaudio defends the single a little bit. Bodoni moves around the back to the back body lock, and then gets one hook in. They get down to the ground. They scramble out of bounds. Bodoni gets, I think he ends up getting an ad for the almost takedown on the back body lock
it's an
hook situation.
This is the
It was
IBJJF rule where it'll be one of the things he does earns him one advantage. And again, I'm unfortunately not versed enough in the rules to let you know exactly what it was, because it might have been where they were up for more than 3 seconds. The rules get very nuanced in sequences like this.
It could have been an almost sweep, depending on how much time they were on their feet. It could have been an almost submission for the original triangle. It could have been an almost takedown for the back body lock takedown situation, which I think is what it was. But he gets an ad for something in there. And then they reset to neutral after that out of bounds. And then Bodoni follows up with like an almost kiss of the dragon.
Got close. So this sequence here, I think, was one of the best sequences in the GP. It was just Bodoni going, again, taking offense to the penalty and just going, all right, I guess we're going to go now. And it was that the flash of the brilliance in the combination attacks that we've not seen from Bodoni in a minute here, where he's just firing through stuff really comfortable. Like what we saw him do at the Worlds, what we saw him do at Trials. Yeah. Where it's just like, oh, he's back on like the pace and the timing for these things to get someone on the defensive to just run sequences on them.
Yeah. And it was beautiful transition work from him. On that Kiss of the Dragon attempt, I think Gaudio ends up turning to turtle, and then Bodoni gets a little high and falls off. But over the course of a couple sequences like that, Bodoni ends up getting up 4-1 ads, I think.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Taking the match on ads, but it was also like it was a win on ads, but Bodoni was putting a lot of work in and showed some really nice chains of attacks. Gaudio was really good at defending them, and then there were some out of bounds things that happened because it's IBJJF. And so, all that aside, Bodoni looked really clean in this match and wasn't able to score any points, but the chains of attacks were really impressive.
Yeah, this is the best I think we've seen Bodoni look in a minute here, and it was nice to see him kind of, as we get closer to ADCC, he seems to be moving back from like the kind of exploratory pieces of his game back into honing into a world championship camp to defend his title, and it's cool to see we were a little concerned, like, okay, well, he's doing a lot of stuff recently. Now he's really honing back down. Like, yep, you were working things, and now this is probably close to the guy we're going to see at the Worlds.
Yeah, I agree.
So Bodoni takes that 4-1 on ads.
Yep. Moving on, Pedro Rocha, Roosevelt Souza. And this is I think where we're going to complain the most about IBJJF rules for the show.
I think that's reasonable.
This match is reasonable. Match starts out with Pedro spamming guillotines. This is kind of what we expect from him at this point.
And because he's got a really, really good... And honestly, the first two guillotines that he throws and the way that he throws them on Roosevelt is very, very good. And I think one of them is actually very, very close.
Agreed.
It is really neat to see Rocha be able to go from the front snap-down guillotine and then be willing to kind of switch to traditionally what is an arm-in guillotine and then throw his leg to the outside. Most guys cannot make that sequence happen and have a good enough bite on the head to ever even think about changing the style of guillotine that they're in. It is really cool to see him be able to do that. And Roosevelt Souza recognizes, okay, Pedro Rocha has a very, very good guillotine. I need to bust and get my head out of that, which he does. Yeah. And then he starts throwing up his own offense off of that sequence.
Yeah, and so 2 really nice guillotines. There's a third guillotine attempt. Souza definitely had to defend it. Rocha's going to get a ad for this second guillotine attempt here. Yeah, I think that's what the ad comes from.
I think it could have been the turnover too, but I think it was this submission that resulted essentially in a change of position.
Right. And so, but the change of position ends up being that Souza's in sort of what I would call Rocha's half guard, or at least close to. It's probably the best thing that I could call it as a half guard, but it's a really loose half guard. And then Rocha's like kind of hanging there. I think he lost the submission, and there might have been that split second where you're like consolidating what happened and figuring out where your body is. And Souza takes that second to sort of oddly jump across, almost looked like he was going to mount, but then instead of stopping at mount, he continued to roll through all the way to the other side and then grabbed Rocha's neck and then pulled him on top of him, pulled Rocha on top of Souza to try to start taking the back, and he's got the rear naked choke arm in super deep.
Yeah, the initial set grip, the other hand is rodeoed out and isn't like locked in yet. Yeah. They have in this sequence, they have rolled. We're going to get into the sequence.
Yeah.
In the sequence, they've rolled
IBJJF has a matted area. They have a border, and then they have a matted area beyond the border. Recently, in the last probably 2 years, they've gotten much better about, like, if you touch the yellow and you are in a sequence, they kind of let you keep going to a little beyond the yellow. But that area is still very poorly defined for when a ref decides to call the match. And so Roosevelt Souza is in the process of getting Pedro Rocha's back. He then...
So Rocha, important point here, Rocha had turned over to Turtle and is
Completely.
now face down.
Yes.
Souza has the choke arm in extremely tight. Like Maine said, the other arm, the anchor arm is still sort of rodeoed out, and he's using it to balance a little bit, but the choke arm is in super tight, and he's working on getting the second hook in.
In the process of throwing the second hook in, as he's doing, not to cut you off.
No, go.
As he's doing that, the ref does what IBJJF does is they have a hand signal and an auditory call to the athletes, which is they spread their hands out like they're doing the T-pose, and they say stop or whatever their call is for IBJJF, and then they pause, and then they make contact with the athletes. And in that, as the referee is leaning his hands out, Roosevelt Souza punches the hook in and punches the choke in.
Yep.
And then the referee touches him after he has the choke in, the hooks in. And then they reset standing in the center of the mat.
To neutral.
And
give Souza an ad.
Yeah.
Which ties things up. And it's just ludicrous to me that you would, stop the match, even thinking about this as in, okay, well, Souza hadn't started the process of getting that second hook in. Well, he wasn't close to getting it. Let's say, in an imaginary world, Souza was not yet that close to getting the second hook in. Why are they stopping it there? Like, he's got a choke arm in extremely tight.
Why are they stopping in a transitional sequence that would result in either 4 points or a change of dominant position or a submission to finish the match?
Yeah.
Because now
and they weren't moving out of the area more. They had been in that turtled position for like a second or two.
Yeah.
And they had been in the same spot, and they were facing the center of the mat. So if motion happened in any way from that exact position, it wouldn't have gone out of the mat. It would have gone towards the center of the mat still. So it wasn't even like they were trying to prevent people from continuing to roll out, and they had been there for a second when the ref decided to start the process of breaking them up. It was just very confusing, the timing of it, and even why. Like, I get in the rules that you're supposed to break things up once they're past the warning area.
Like this, my issue is this was a correct reset for IBJJF, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like, so in speaking to like the rule set that I enjoy, which is ADCC, how ADCC deals with this is there are no boundaries and they just let you keep going. This is one of those times where it would be absolutely appropriate. They're not even off the matted area. Yeah. You have a sequence that could be a match-ending sequence. Like, I've, as a judge, thrown chairs away, moved out, like, to let guys go. But even this is still on the matted area. IBJJF, I really think, needs to look, especially if they're GPs. For your regular tournaments, I understand.
Yeah.
But for your GPs, for your major professional events where there is tens of thousands of dollars on the line and, like, big prestige points for IBJJF, when they're still on the matted area and a sequence is playing out, give the athletes the courtesy to give it a little, a little breathing room. So ADCC, the other thing that the referees do is if you stop the match, you are required to have contact to both athletes.
Yeah.
So the other thing is Roosevelt Souza, you maybe or maybe don't hear the referee with an auditory call, especially when you're face down looking for a rear naked choke on a guy, and it's like that extra second or not, you're not going to hear. You're going to continue to go your sequence, and then you feel contact from the referee.
Yeah.
IBJJF, I really think, needs to modernize the way that the referees interface with the athletes. We need to recognize that we are not judo, and we need to do this how other sports do it, where in a sequence you make contact with the athlete.
First. Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, look at how MMA does it.
Wrestling is the place that you should go for this, right? That's the closest example where there's like a true out of bounds that exists, and the rules around out of bounds are better in wrestling, I think. But there's a true out of bounds that exists, and if you're stopping something when people are on the mat because they've rolled out of bounds in wrestling, you just go touch the athletes.
Yeah.
That's it. Like we're not.
You make kind of in that moment. I don't have to guess when or the ref didn't say stop, and it eliminates a lot of this kind of legacy holdover. Again, this was absolutely a correct stoppage for IBJJF for the way the rules are written. I just really wish that we would reevaluate this because Roosevelt Souza loses this match.
Yeah.
And he was dominant in this match and had this sequence, and he is awarded one advantage for this sequence that was going to be a match-ending sequence. He was going to finish this because he had both hooks in. He was either going to get the 4 points, but with how deep that choke was in, and Pedro Hostra is astonishingly tough. He didn't tap to this. I don't want to claim that he did.
No.
But Roosevelt Souza is a rear naked choke specialist. He's really, really good and got a hell of a squeeze on him.
Even if he doesn't finish, he's up 4. And in this match, that Roosevelt Souza loses on ads 2-1.
Loses on one advantage.
Loses on one advantage, right? And
for a guillotine. He loses on a guillotine advantage. And
Yep.
that was
Yep.
He gets one advantage for a locked-in rear naked choke with 4 points.
And it was also, Hosha played, again, I know that this is Hosha's passing style. He played a lot of that outside lateral passing that you can get away with in IBJJF and not a lot of other rule sets. And then was, sort of looking for that guillotine. He was kind of it seemed like he was kind of trying to frustrate Souza to lean up and lean in to create to close some distance, and was looking for the guillotine, and that's a fine thing to do.
And that's where Pedro Hosha makes his hay, is you lean up at the guillotine and he fucking murders you for it.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that style of game.
Yeah, and great, that's fine. But when you have a sequence where Souza was so dominant, and then the rest of the match is just is Pedro Hosha running, skipping around in circles.
Yeah.
Right? It's a frustrating thing to see.
Yeah. So Pedro Hosha moves on from here.
Yep.
It was kind of the most, I think, of all the matches, it was the most frustrating of the weekend because my frustration is that this was the correct call in the organization.
It's almost worse that it was the correct call. If this was a bad call, then we could complain about the ref.
Right.
But it's not a bad call.
It's the correct call, which is really frustrating because you have things like this where it's that's kind of, it doesn't sit right with how that match probably should have gone in any other rule set or other prestigious Nogi rule sets.
Yep.
So, first round's complete. Moving on to the semifinals. Zach, what do you want to start with for the
Kaynan
semifinal?
Duarte versus Dante Leon. And so Kaynan is, there's an interesting comment from Craig from ADCC where Craig
Jones,
yeah.
He was in the finals with Kaynan Duarte for 2022. And notably went, no way in hell I'm ever doing plus under 99 again after that shit.
So, and he said it happened even before the match. Kaynan came up and pat him on the back, and they sort of had a quick interaction before the match happened. And Craig said when he felt Kainan's hand on his back, he went, "Oh shit, I shouldn't be in this weight division," right? And so we're going into this match with Dante, who
has gone up to super heavy, has done absolute, has won absolutes. Versus a guy like Duarte, who every person I have ever spoken to about Duarte and every interview I have heard people talk about people facing Duarte, it has come up. They're like, he's weirdly strong. He's weirdly strong. And maybe that year he had to take from IBJJF off after that world title, he is absurdly strong. So Dante Leon has to go up against Kaynan Duarte now, and that maybe or may not have played a little bit of a factor in this match. But again, in absolutes it does.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it did, and that's fine and to be expected. Dante's also one of the smaller people that was in this tournament overall. I think he was the smallest.
Probably
in the tournament.
Yeah, because Dante is at most 170 here.
Yeah.
And I think Elder is probably comfortably 85.
Yeah.
And then every other person in this tournament is pushing 2 bills.
Yeah.
At least.
And so the stage is set with Dante giving up some weight to one of the guys that even at his true weight is notorious for being huge and strong, right? And so Kaynan pulls guard immediately and then very aggressively moves into sit-up guard and then very aggressively comes up on a single. And by aggressive, I don't mean it didn't look like Kaynan was burning a lot of energy to do this by aggressive. I just mean he wasn't wasting time.
He got a hold of Dante very quickly, and then you could see him sort of you could see him kind of overwhelm Dante very quickly with the forward motion. Dante kind of goes to get out, but Kaynan has such a good hold on him that he sort of just ends up turning Dante over with the sweep, but sort of a variation of a wrestle-up sweep. And
it was really interesting because you could tell Dante went, yeah, we're early in the match. This is not a sequence I'm going to fight super hard. I'm just going to sit. I'm going to take the 2 getting scored on me and then play from my guard. And like, I'll just deal with this sequence happening. And that it seemed like a tactical decision from Dante to go like, all right, I'm just going to like take the 2. We're the first 30 seconds of the match. I'll deal with this now as the bottom player.
And unfortunately for him, those 2 points that Kaynan scored for that sweep are what wins him the match. And so Kaynan ends up playing that same sort of low headquarters, knee cut passing style. And Dante does an admirable job fending him off.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Dante. Again, we're always really impressed with Dante's guard work, but to stop a guy like Duarte from passing for that long, and Duarte knew he was up on points too, and I don't think ever was interested in overextending himself and, let him go to the legs or something like that, which is a place that Dante is very strong, and Duarte historically has had an issue now and again. It was very tactically played well from Duarte, but Leon, to his credit, man, we saw Duarte be able to pass Haisam Rita twice in that match. Wasn't able to get past Dante.
Yeah. And so, I mean, admirable guard retention from Dante for basically 9 minutes.
A good match to watch if you ever want to see Dante retain the guard. His first IBJJF Nogi World title that he had against his teammate, Jamie Canuto. You see the last like 2 or 3 minutes of that match are him playing a variation of an open like outside De La Riva guard, and it really just kind of shows you this piece of his game from a long range. It's really a neat match to kind of go back and see the evolution of Dante's guard and how good his guard retention is.
Yeah. And so Kaynan ends up getting some ads for almost passing here and there throughout the match, but ultimately those 2 points that he scored on that initial sweep win him the match after 9 minutes of guard retention from Dante.
Yeah. I thought it was a great decision to make where Duarte just like I didn't expect Duarte to sit so quickly, but it's something we've seen him do. We did did it to I did it in Polaris GP.
Yeah.
I forget who he did it to. It might have been, it wasn't Owen, was it? No, because Owen went against, I forget who he did it to, but he did it to in the Polaris GP too, and we were really, I think Fabricio Andre maybe.
Yeah, and I think tactically for Kaynan, or strategically for Kaynan in this match, right? Dante has some decent wrestling. Kaynan probably wins the wrestling on that. If Kaynan is choosing to stay up with Dante, Dante's probably gonna at some point recognize that he's not winning that wrestling, and Dante pulls guard, and then Dante pulls guard, and you have to deal with his guard, right? And it's feasible that Kaynan could have passed. It's feasible that Dante pulls guard, and Kaynan just runs up on ads and wins that way. But the pull from Kaynan seems like a smart choice here because you're taking away Dante's ability to wrestle, which, crazier things have happened in wrestling shootouts than Dante taking down
Go
Kaynan.
back and watch Fabricio Andre versus Kaynan Duarte, or Fabricio Andre versus Giancarlo Bodoni in the Polaris GP.
Right.
Like, Fabricio Andre was the smallest guy in that bracket and put some dudes on their back a couple of times or went for like big judo sequences. Yep. It is not out of the question that Dante Leon, also a very competent wrestler in his own respect, can pull off some great techniques as well.
And so Kaynan, like, if I'm thinking about Dante, I don't want to be in his guard and I don't want to be wrestling with him. So pulling guard seems like the quickest avenue to a win for Kaynan here, and that's what it was.
Gets his points and gets up, and this is a tactic we've seen. I have to remember moving into ADCC that this is a tactic we've now seen him used repeatedly, because I think, and it's won him numerous matches. I think this is something we're going to see him do in ADCC.
Yeah,
he's like trialing this and it's working well every single time. I don't think I've ever seen it blow up in his face. He pulls, he immediately sweeps you with this variation of wrestle up, and then he wins the match.
Yep.
So, moving on. Unless you have anything else on that one?
Nope, that was it.
Giancarlo Bodoni defeats Pedro Rocha via points, 4-0, 4-0.
So this time Bodoni opts to pull, which, Bodoni's been using his wrestling a lot, and I think this is an intelligent matchup for him to pull.
I think with Pedro Rocha, because the threat of the snap-down guillotine is there, and the way that Giancarlo stands, like, this is a really great decision, because Pedro Rocha, 1 point standing, is going to get your neck.
Yep.
And then because he's maybe not the smaller guy here, but then he's going to launch into a knee inside guillotine, and you're going to have to defend that.
Yeah.
Just nope, let's not do that, and let's come back. I think Pedro Rocha and Giancarlo are more similar in size.
Yeah, I think they're pretty close.
And tactically, I think this is absolutely the right decision to make here.
Yeah, I think so. And then what we end up seeing is Pedro playing that sort of detached lateral passing situation that we've seen him play before, and in his previous match that he won. This time the refs were not fucking around, and they called stalling on him 3 times. I think he got 3 stalling calls for this style of passing, at least 2. I think that
I don't remember. It was this was, I think, appropriate because in the first couple matches, he was more. The range he was playing was closer. In this match, he was more willing to walk and basically take 2 or 3 steps back.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing that IBJJF will start calling you for stalling for, is if you start actually stepping backwards. If you were engaged or maybe like 1 step in, 1 step out, they'll let you keep playing.
Yeah.
But as soon as you like take 2 steps or completely disengage from the position, that's when they start giving you negatives. And that's why he was scoring the negatives here in that. Again, the event was scored, I think, very well. It's how IBJJF scores things. But that's the difference in the first match to the second match, is the tactics of how he was doing it.
And he was typically backing up a couple steps when he got a little close, and Bodoni was able to get a grip that he didn't like, and he was definitely Hosha was clearly escaping the grips that Bodoni had set up and then backing out that way, and he got 2 penalties for that because no points were awarded, and at the 3rd penalty there's points awarded, so no points were awarded for the penalties, but it did set up a situation where then Hosha had to stop doing that. And he sort of almost didn't stop doing that because Bodoni gets a good bite on double wrist grip. And then Hosha starts thinking about backing out again. And I think that this is probably where the penalty points played in, because where he had been in a similar situation before, he was able to like really exaggerated pull back.
And yank back and actually move his entire body out of the range and force Giancarlo to like overextend on that grip.
And then Giancarlo lets it go. Hosha gets a penalty call, right? That happened twice now. This time I think that he had to second guess about that pullback, and instead he starts pulling straight up. This allows Bodoni to go from the double wrist grip to the wrist and elbow grip, and then sort of does a extended arm drag. Like Bodoni is a little further away with the grips than you would like to see typically.
Bodoni is fucking good at this.
Yeah.
I have been he is one of the, I think, best arm draggers in the heavier divisions. Like I'm trying to think I've been repeatedly impressed with his ability to like shuck by and arm drag guys to the back. It's something we don't see a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu get very good, unless you're a wrestler like Cody Steele, or unless you're guys that are coming from wrestling backgrounds. It's not something we see, and I think Bodoni does it really, really well.
Yeah, and so this is a testament to that, because he's not in perfect position for this. He's a little bit extended. His elbows are a little further away from his body than you would like to see with like if you're teaching a correct arm drag, it's a little closer to your body than he was here, but he's still able to pull Hosha so far over that Hosha has to plant with his elbow on the mat, and then Bodoni gets an opportunity to get an inside hook and lift Hosha's legs up a little bit. Hosha's able to recover back down to his knee, but as Hosha's body weight is coming back down, Bodoni's coming up, and he comes up onto the single. And it was just a really nice sequence into the single from Bodoni there.
Yeah.
And I think that he ends up getting the takedown off of that single, which is not a takedown technically in this case. I think it was a sweep. It's
technically a sweep. But again, I need to go back actually and reread the IBJJF rules for takedown and sweep. Missing pictures there, Zach?
No, I'm missing notes after my pictures.
Stuff didn't sync.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
Something didn't sync.
Yeah, but that was the sequence I thought was the most interesting in the match, was that the change of tactics for Pedro, whereas he was pulling out previously, he now has to pull up, and Giancarlo recognized that when he pulls up, the range is still, he can regrip on the elbow and then turn him over. It was a really, really nice sequence. Again, Bodoni takes that 4-0.
Yeah, he scores 2 more later in the match, which I'm not remembering directly off the top of my head, and my notes apparently did not sink down that low for whatever reason. So
it was an impressive performance from Bodoni. Yeah. Really after that sequence, it was very much Bodoni's match.
Yeah.
And the
Hosha
the writing
tends
was
not to play incredibly well once he's behind.
Yeah, that's something we've seen historically from him for a very long time, is that when he front runs very well. Like, go back and watch his match with Mika Gabao.
Yep.
Like, that was I think it was a Jits King match or a Third Coast match, like, years ago. It was one of Mika Gabao's first big, like, adult tournaments, and Pedro Hosha, really put it to him in that match. I think almost beat him. But he was ahead at most of that match, and that's really that's a great match to see when Hosha can front run, how good he looks when you put him on the back feet, when you put points against him early, he tends to not be able to recover that unless he can just guillotine you and finish the match.
He likes to play that cautious game and bait people into things, and you can't play cautious and bait people when you're down on points. And so I think it forces a strategy shift for him a lot that doesn't go as well as it can for some other people that have a different strategy up front.
Yeah. So now we move on to the finals. Anything else on that one?
Nope, that's it.
When the finals, we had what we called. And if you looked at the bracket, you probably went, that's how it's going to go.
Right.
The finals we didn't get at Polaris GP. The finals we did get here, Kaynan Duarte versus Giancarlo Bodoni, and it was close.
Yeah, it was close. It was a nice match. This starts out with Kaynan shooting a single and then immediately coming up to the back body lock, which is funny because that's sort of Giancarlo's thing.
What he does. I mean, that's what a lot of the new wave guys
I know,
do.
it is, yeah.
That's like that and the same side trip. Those two things are like the new wave thing that whenever you see a new wave guy stand, those are the two things they're looking for. So it was very funny to see like the Uno reverse card where it was like Kaynan, but also it's something we've seen from Kaynan as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing that works really well in the ADCC rule set. And so it's a thing that you're seeing from those people.
From
and that
the
makes
top dogs, 2 ADCC champions, under 99, under 88. Makes sense that you'd see something like that.
Yeah. But it was funny to see that earlier in the tournament, we were seeing that from Giancarlo, and then we see it from Kaynan against him. And so Kaynan ends up in this back body lock for a little while, and eventually Giancarlo tries to drop and roll through the knee bar, and Kainan's able to sort of stuff the knee bar.
The sequence that Giancarlo hits looks exactly like Gary Tonin defending Wagner Hosha's back body lock attempt when he does the airplane, does the roll through, but I think 2015 or 2017, I think, Finland. That exact same sequence, and he did it. And I think Jake Watson on commentary, again, great commentary, called it out. He's like, I like Gary Tonin. I was like, that is exactly the way Gary Tonin does it, because Gary Tonin shoots his arms wide and then rolls over and does a flip onto his shoulders in the exact way that Giancarlo did. And I was like, oh, look at that. That makes sense. You're both a new wave.
Yeah. Didn't work as well for Giancarlo this time.
Different weights, too.
Yeah, different weights, sure.
I mean, that was back at 77 kilos.
I don't know. I don't know if you noticed this, but it was funny listening to the commentary. I think commentary did an incredible job, but it was also very clear that they were told that they should not mention ADCC because there were numerous times where they referenced matches but refused to say where it was, and they would always, or there would be a more interesting match or a more interesting title, like someone won ADCC, and they're like, and also won Euros in 2023. Like that's the.
So we do commentary. This comes up a lot. It's like I always ask the promoter whenever we're doing commentary. It's like, hey, do you want us to not mention other organizations or not? And some would prefer us not to, and some are totally good with it. But it is a question that I ask the first time we ever work with a new promoter. Is like, hey, what is your preference here? And it's it depending on the level we're at, it changes. But it is very funny if we're mentioning like, are we mentioning that he did ADCC, or are we keeping that quiet?
Yeah, and so it was clear that they wanted to keep that quiet here. I thought it was really funny because the commentary did bring up Gary Tonin in that match, which was an ADCC match, but they just did not say where it was. And so, but Kainan's able to sort of stuff that knee bar roll through pretty well, and ends up finishing the.
I was looking for it.
Yeah,
you could tell because you saw that. Not to cut you off here.
No, please.
You could see that Giancarlo was checking down, and you could see that Duarte, Kaynan and Giancarlo were both going, okay, there's a chance that he rolls for this knee bar, and you saw Duarte like move his hips a little further back, and you saw Giancarlo continue to try to like scoot around. He didn't want to overcommit for the knee bar roll, but it was one of those where I have to show you that this is an option for me so that you don't get high up and lift me for the body lock. And it was this neat little game of chicken that you got to see happen as they kind of circled before Giancarlo did the Granby.
Yep. And this match then ends up, so Kaynan gets the 2 points for the takedown on that because he's able to stuff the roll through and ends up on top. That's the takedown point. So Kaynan goes up 2 points. And then the match kind of played out like Kainan's previous match in the tournament where he was clearly actually trying to pass. Like, I don't think that...
Yeah, I appreciate that.
This is a little bit in contrast to Hosha's style where it's harder to see that there's real clear pass attempts. Like, Kaynan is in position, he's in tight, he's trying to pass, he's getting ads for almost passing a couple times.
When you watch on jiu-jitsu, you can see there is a very big difference at the high levels when a guy is looking to burn time on a clock and looking for you to make a mistake in that range, and when a guy is actually looking to put demonstrable pass attempts on you. It looks different. The problem is a lot of organizations don't score it different. They score each as pass attempts. And so, but we see Duarte here, like you said, actually engaging, getting the hips low, starting to drive across and trying to actually score more points on Giancarlo.
Yeah, and Giancarlo does a nice job forcing Kaynan to defend and adjust and switch out and reset position over and over again as he's trying to enter into the legs. But Kaynan does a really nice job. So this is sort of the shift that I was talking about earlier, and this is the passing style that we saw Kaynan play over and over again. But it sounds like the classic situation where you go from headquarters to knee cut and back and forth between headquarters and knee cut. And it sort of is that, but the version of headquarters that Kaynan was playing here was, instead of being with knees at like 90 degrees or just under 90 degrees and the sort of butt up and mobile and on the feet, he is almost squat down, like ass to ankles, and like leaning in forward and heavy. And I think that like he's sitting as low as possible on that inside ankle in that headquarters position, and then leaning heavy into the top knee in a way that's stopping a lot of people from getting into the K guard that they want to enter entanglements. It was just a really nice thing to see.
This is how you pass to stop a leg locker. You have to pass low, because if you start to posture up, they're going to be able to push you up. So if you stay super low like this, they're unable to usually have the strength to lift you up to even get your knees off to start getting underneath you. And so it's nice to see Duarte making that change, but also I think this is where the meta is changing, and we're seeing more guys like, hey, if you want to have a leg lock battle, guys will pass up and look to counter in the legs. If you want to just pass the guard and not deal with the legs, this is how guys are passing now.
Yeah, and that was my point here, I think, overall, was that it's an interesting meta change and just a slight way that you're doing the same kind of jiu-jitsu, and you still have access to a lot of the same techniques, but you're doing it from a slightly different position with slightly modified versions of every technique that is adapting to the way the meta has shifted. It's a really interesting thing to see from Kaynan in this very particular instance.
Yeah.
He takes that.
Yeah, he takes it with those 2 points.
That's kind of what we thought. This is, again, the finals match that we expected to get. Some upsets here and there like we thought we were going to have. But overall, again, a great showing from all the guys in the tournament. Great showing from Kaynan. He, is the IBJJF GP champ. Let's move on to anything else on the tournament side. I think we kind of covered everything pretty extensively.
I think that was it.
Moving on to the super fights. Zach, where do you want to start off here?
I'm going to start with Kaynan because this match was dope.
Jesus. What, 2 minutes? Minute and a half?
Yeah.
Minute? Something like that?
A little over 2, I thought.
Commentary did a great job on the opening, making it seem like this match possibly had the chance to be close. And then Kaynan went, it will not.
No.
Man, dude, he is so good.
He's so good.
He's so good in that weird kind of way that you don't see very often. It's very exciting to watch unfold live.
And his opening... actually, I'm not sure if it was his opening takedown sequence. He had a couple like snap down, like heavy collar, not heavy collar tie because it's in the gi, so you can do these like heavy lapel drops instead of drags instead of like doing the collar tie.
It's not really a drag; it's a drop.
Yeah, and it's the same sort of concept. You're just trying to get the person's posture broken down and annoy the shit out of them. And he does that a couple times, and maybe like
for reference, we're now all the rest of the tournament, the super fights are all in the gi. So we're going to move from Nogi into the gi for IBJJF.
And so this is a gi match, and Kaynan has the Oliveira's collar and is yanking it down real heavy, kind of annoying, right? And he maybe hits a single attempt off of it once or twice in the first minute or two, or it doesn't even go that long. There's the first like real honest heavy attempt at a takedown in this match. Kaynan does that same collar drop, kind of heavy collar drop, and then reaches for a single, and it's definitely an outside single. It's further than you would want to reach for a single if you're a traditional wrestler. Like, this is way outside. It's not, and you're not going to teach high school wrestlers to shoot a single from this far out. But he does a really interesting thing with this. Since he has the collar, he's able to sort of pull Oliveira over his head and also post up. So he gets Oliveira's weight leaning forward enough with that collar tie that he's then able to sort of overhead press Oliveira, just enough of Oliveira's weight up in that position for just long enough that Oliveira then has to bring his hips in order to stay up. And Oliveira actually brings the single closer to Kaynan in this process. It was just such an incredible setup, and like the way that he had to go, the way that Kaynan dealt with Oliveira's pressure and used that lapel was incredibly impressive. He actually ends up able to get the single, and as he climbs up the single, he's still holding on to the lapel. And then once you have that single, he's able to, honestly, you just heavy collar drag, but because you have the single leg, your opponent, so in this case Oliveira, can't do anything to rebalance themselves, and Oliveira's face just slams into the mat off of this collar, this like redrag of the collar. And then Kaynan does another thing that was just incredibly intelligent jiu-jitsu, because Oliveira is now face down on the mat in almost like he's trying to climb up to a base, so almost turtle type position, and Kaynan steps his outside leg all the way behind Oliveira's butt over top of the other leg so that Oliveira can't stand back up. And because he can't stand back up, Kaynan's able to score the points after he just kind of pushes the hips over. It was a really, really nice sequence from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Beautiful jiu-jitsu.
This is how you will teach someone in the gi, because you can drag on the gi. You can take those. Again, traditional wrestling doesn't have the jacket.
I'm still not teaching people to take a single from that far out. I think it worked here, but I wouldn't teach someone to take a single from 3 feet away from the leg.
Bad example. I'm saying that this is something we see more frequently in the gi, because people are learning now how to use, like, you're used to a single being shot at a certain range, and you're used to being able to stuff it at a certain range. Mm-hmm. If you suddenly have the collar, you can drag people and keep them in that range in a different kind of way. And it is nice to see people touching the legs again in the gi.
Yeah.
Because judo hasn't had it in a lot of years, and so it's nice to see. Like, when I first saw the sequence, like, did he just double like him? And I had to go back and be like, oh no, it's just a variation of a single at least. But to see Daupra like shooting for the legs essentially and being successful with it in the gi with gi variations and gi grips is very nice, and it's exciting.
It was a nice sequence. Oliveira's able to make it back up to his feet with Kaynan in back body lock, and then Kaynan does a mat return to get the two in this case. But those two don't really matter, because after the turn, Kaynan secures a hook, sets up the choke, gets the second hook, which is something that we see pretty much always happen nowadays. It's one hook, choke, second hook later.
Yeah. The way he got the hook, though, was kind of neat, though, because you saw him set the hook, and then he pulls Oliveira over to, and normally guys for years were struggling to punch the second hook through as they did that. Kaynan had the timing on it where he pulls him for it and then punches the hook in on the reset for the hips, and it was just the camera angle you could see that happen, and it was really nice. Yep, other hook's in, there it is.
Yeah. And then Kaynan's able to finish with the belly down RNC. I think it was an RNC.
Yeah. It was quick, and Oliveira like very much didn't like fight it for super long. It was tight, and he kind of okay, this is the sequence.
Yeah, man, Kaynan is so damn good.
Yeah, and now again, good. I'm next one. I want to see him against Jansen Gomez. I think Jansen Gomez is the only gi match, and then like Miguel Gavao and Tyro Tolo. Okay, there's a bunch there's a lot of gi matches I want to see, but the one I'm really gunning for now is that Jansen Gomez match, because they bring up his records, his black belt IBJJF record every time he's that one, and I'm like, well, you got to run it back. Then.
Yeah, you have to see that again, but also like Ty and Cade would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Galvao, Mika Galvao in the gi.
Somebody said, I don't know where I heard it, that potentially that division at Worlds this year in the gi is going to be Ty, Mika, Kaynan, and some other young killer, and I forget who's in it. But like those three or four guys are in the same division. And I don't think Ty and Cade are going to be in the same division anymore. They were at Brown Belt World Finals in the same division, but I think now Ty is up and Cade is down a weight class.
They split weights now, or at least trying to.
Yeah, and as a couple years ago, it was odd to see them in the same bracket, but I think they have like more formally. Ty is now bigger.
Yeah.
So. Yep. Phenomenal match. Again, we've talked about it longer than it was. Kaynan keeps doing Kaynan Duarte things, and it looks pretty untouchable at the weight in the gi.
And speaking of Cade, he had his black belt gi debut here, which is kind of funny because I'm pretty sure he's been at black belt for
2 years.
2 years.
Because
so
brown belt finals was him and his brother, and Ty beat him at the Worlds at brown belt,
Yep.
and then because they both got promoted, the IBJJF rule it's more
Yeah.
than IBJJF rules. If you win brown belt Worlds, you are automatically eligible for the following year. You've qualified to do black belt Worlds. So technically, because Cade didn't beat his brother, he was ineligible in that time to do brown belt Worlds. So he talks about it in the post-fight interview a little bit. And so he seems a little salty about that. He seems he's going to have to do some more IBJJF gi events to get enough points, which is the dumbest shit ever.
Right.
But again, I
give him
understand it.
Yeah, you can give him a super fight at your premier event, but he has to do more events to get
The points to recognize. You're like, all right, let's not pretend that he's an ADCC champion. He's a 1FC champion. But
we don't talk about ADCC.
We gotta make sure that he gets his points to qualify. Like,
we got to make sure that he gives us enough money beforehand. All right. So Cade, black belt gi debut, against
Nathan Chung.
Yeah.
Nathan Chung. Yeah.
Nathan Chung. And so holy hell.
Jesus. He still looks good in the gi. He looks
good.
as good in the gi as he looked in Nogi. It just slowed him down a little bit, but not even that much.
I don't know if it slowed him down. He did his like standard. I don't know. It's like he's a Street Fighter character.
Philly shell. He looks like he's gonna throw like a hand down Philly shell where he blades off to the side like he's gonna block with his lead shoulder and then like counter cross. It is such a funny...
And then shoots a single off of it.
And then shoots a single.
Right. But wild. But the single that he shot was absolutely textbook, right? It's an outside single from a little bit of a distance, but reasonable, like a wrestler's distance for this outside single. He hits this outside single and gets Natan to the ground. Natan's able to set up a single leg X off of it, like pretty quickly. And Natan actually hit a surprisingly nice elevator sweep here. And then Cade just does the most Cade shit that I've seen done in maybe ever, right? And so Natan does this beautiful job with this elevator sweep and has double pant grips. And like traditionally, an elevator sweep with double pant grips is a sweep. You're gonna finish it.
You win.
You win. Yeah, you get that. You get those
grips,
points.
You get them up, and then it's like, and then I score my points.
Because they can't put their feet on the ground to prevent you from getting those points. They can't put their knees on the ground to get their hips up. And Cade just twists himself around and starts doing handstands. He's in the wheelbarrow position for a little bit. He's just doing everything he can to make sure his hip does not touch the mat for more than half a second. And I loved seeing it.
That is actually how you defend that sweep. But most guys when they do handstand like this, the other guy stands up and can roll them over. But Cade is athletic enough and quick enough with his hip positioning where Dayton's never able to get behind him long enough to set up to roll him back over and settle him down. He's forced to chase him, and it was this weird little
so strange.
Oh yeah, if you are confident enough in your movement, your balance, and your athleticism, that is a very valid way to defend that with just like leveraging those skills and traits.
Yeah, it was incredible to see. And eventually, so Cade is in this sort of wheelbarrow position with his feet crossed even. And then rolls through for the knee bar and has just enough momentum on it to force Natan to let go of the double pant grip. Yeah. And then Cade scrambles up to his feet to clear the position, and that's that. Nothing happened. No ads, no points, no nothing, because Cade did just such a wonderful job defending the whole thing. It was wild.
A guy that's grown up competing in jiu-jitsu, that's grown up in the IBJJF system, like with under Galva, one of the best tacticians and understanders of the rule set in the world, who is in his corner along with his brother. Like, he knows very much exactly. It's something we see from both Rotolos is they rarely make tactical decision errors and mistakes in combination with they rarely make technical errors for positioning and point scoring. Like,
do they make technical errors? I have no idea.
That's what I'm saying.
Their style is so wild. Well, no, we might. Their style is so unusual that if they did have a technical error, we wouldn't really know. Like,
that's a good point.
Like, they do so many funky things. Like, could there have been technical errors or technical errors that occurred during this sequence? Possibly. I wouldn't know.
I'm just saying for
like the to prevent the hip from coming down and being scored, like the score, like they're doing things in a way that prevents the scoring and even the ad scoring, and it is really neat to see how they're addressing those positions to prevent those things.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so we end up back on the feet. There's a guard pull from Natan, I believe, some nice passing attempts. There's an almost pass that made Natan stand back up. Cade gets the duck under from the collar grip, then hits a single. Just, his grappling intelligence was on display during this match, and it was.
There's a reason he's one FC champion and ADCC champion, undefeated in both organizations.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Yeah.
So he gets that second takedown, and then time runs out.
There's one sequence I want to talk about in this match. At the end of the match, Cade Bertolo does a front flip over top of Nathan Chung. If you know the match, think about it right now. This is from that 2007 Worlds match with Andre Galvao versus the fake black belt that has the rap song over it. Andre Galvao in the match does this exact same front flip over the guard of this guy that tried to heel hook him in the gi, and Cade Bertolo brings it back and does it again. And even Jake Watson kind of mentioned that. Mentioned it's like unorthodox, but it is, if you look at how Cade does it and you look at how Andre Galvao does it in that match, it is the exact same sequence from the exact same grip, done in the exact same way, and kind of botched. Both Andre and Cade kind of botched it in the exact same way. And it was like, I want to get a chance to interview Cade again just to ask if, like, was that an homage or, like, what were you... I'm really, really curious about that, because it was I want to see them side by side. It was exactly the same thing. So, Cade Bertolo now undefeated in the gi and IBJJF.
Yep.
I cannot wait to see him kind of do more gi stuff. Again, he's bringing that flavor back to the gi. We have a lot of gi practitioners now. We've kind of got out of the dark ages of mirrored 50-50 lapel guard, double berimbolo pulls, and we've kind of moved back into a lot of really young, exciting, technical athletes that are willing to push paces, willing to go for finishes, and willing to really leave it all on the line. And I think it's really made the gi a lot more exciting. Again, Kaynan and Cade, two of the most exciting guys in the sport, and now we're seeing them back in the jackets. So, very, very excited. I'm going to run through some other. Zach, you stop me where you want to stop me here. We had Andy Murasaki defeating Mateus Luna via armbar. Really neat armbar sequence. The camera angle is perfect for this. We have Andy Murasaki to the side. You can see him kind of adjusting the way he's finishing the armbar Mateus Luna. Any notes you want to throw in this one? It was a super nice armbar, and I think Mateus potentially got his arm hurt a little bit here, but great positioning and great adjustments from Andy Murasaki for like the variation of a belly down to the side armbar. He hits on Mateus Luna. Jackson the guy defeats Sandre Silva via advantages 3-0. Again, really impressive performance from the guy. Seemed pretty dominant the whole time. Very tactical match. Zach Kayina defeats Shane Jamil Taylor via advantages. I think
This is one advantage up, but there was 4 and 4 on the board. This was an interesting match. An interesting match for the second half.
I think the whole match was really. It was a gi lapel players match that was very technical, but it was a little hard to see based on the cameras. We had exactly what grips they had because Shane and Zach play really low in their positioning, and so it's really hard to see that. If you know, like I've done, I think 1 or 2 seminars with Shane, and so I have a better understanding of exactly how he plays. But
I always have
really
a hard time getting
see.
Excited about this type of match. The second half of this match I really enjoyed. The first half of this match, my notes for the first half of this match are 6 minutes of butt stuff because it was a lot of like 50-50-ish positions and attempts at moving back and forth between them. With about 4 minutes left, things got a lot more interesting, at least from my perspective, because we saw...
Because you're a heavyweight, Zach. These are my people.
Yeah, big boys. We do less interesting things, honestly, overall, but I can see them. Zach does a nice job. Like, Zach starts the actual, like, really aggressive sequences from these two with a stand-up from 50-50, and then Shane responds by also standing up from 50-50. And so they're standing, both of them are standing in the air with pant grips on the other.
Groin to groin, as the IBJJF intended. This is funny. This comes up whenever you get two really strong lapel players that decide to try to tech stand up out of 50-50. This is, again, exactly what you should be doing here, because if you don't do this, you lose.
Yeah.
And so it's a half back out, and then it's basically who has the better balance to counter sweep from this position, because usually it's mirrored grips. Usually it's about a mirrored stand up, and at any point it's I wanted the sequence not pretty infrequently, but occasionally, because this is something that I see at my weight class, where it's like, oh, right, we've both decided to do the same thing from mirrored position, and now we're both hopping on one foot, and if anyone lets go of a grip, you lose, so you're forced into this sequence by the other guy. Zak does a really great job of actually beating Shane in this sequence, and I was really impressed with it, because I actually...
Well, the second time. The first time, they both just end up back into 50-50 somehow, and then the second time Zak stands up, he's actually able to beat Shane in this exact against the same situation. Super interesting. Zak full stands up and then like rolls through for the takedown, ends up on top, and that was the first score of the match. And this was, I think, so Zak is a newer black belt, and
that's correct.
Had some really interesting wins recently, Euros maybe,
and a Heat, I think. And we watched Zak at one of the original Spiders. He was a purple belt. Not original Spiders, but like a Spider probably back in like 2020. He was a purple belt.
Okay.
He was on that like road to black belt card, and that's where we first came across him. But now he's a newer black belt, and again taking on a former world champion in Shane.
One of the only American, only non-Brazilian world champions in the gi. And so, that first 2 points was a little shocking, because the pedigree of Shane Jamilo Taylor, like it was an impressive score. Shane is able to secure a lasso, and then the commentary sort of was like, I don't think they were talking shit about the lasso guard, but they were kind of like, this is kind of out of flavor now, but if anyone's going to make it work, it's Shane.
But Shane, again, having taken, I think, longer seminars with him on this exact sweep, it is nice to see that he's able to hit Zak Hyena with it, because I'm like, oh, cool. He used me as a demo for an entire seminar, and not once did I have an option of like, at any point in time, do I even have a dream of stopping this sweep?
Yeah.
And then we rolled, and it was the same thing. It was just like, oh, I have absolutely no answer for how you set this up, and just beautifully kind of like a crowbar variation of a lasso sweep gets Hyena up.
Really nice. And what I liked about it most was actually the finish in this particular match, because Shane is able to get Zak onto his hips, and then they're sort of both laying flat. And he's got control. Shane has control of Zak's arm in a way that Zak can't get back up.
Yeah.
And he's got a pant grip so that Zak can't move to top.
Right.
But also, Shane's not exactly in a position where he's going to be able to come to top easily or responsibly without letting go of either of those grips, but he still manages to not let go of either of those grips, uses the lasso arm to sort of pull his hips closer to Zak's head, and then scoots his hips up like little bumps one at a time to get up into a position where he can now sort of invert enough to then drop his own knee back underneath him. It was a really impressive finish, and one of those things that like you see that come with incredible amounts of training, where the patience to do that, to hold the grips and make sure that they can't come back up while you take your time, is really impressive.
2020 or 2021, they went through, floated an interview with Shane, and it was basically him walking through a lot of his Worlds matches when he won and talking about what he's thinking about in the moment. It is I wish they would do it more often.
Yeah.
It is a wildly interesting interview, because it's him basically going, oh yeah, here, and it's him talking through, I knew he could go here, so I knew that I wanted to have my grip sequence here, and I knew that I would take this outside grip, he would be forced to, and it's like him walking through all of these possibilities in the match and why exactly he is selecting. It's like, oh yeah, earlier in the match, I thought that I had the jump on it. It is super interesting to hear him articulate exactly what he's thinking in these sequences, and like there is a thought, but nothing in Shane's game is like spur of the moment. It is very, very rote, but it is drilled that hard. You can see it in matches like this where he's going to exactly what he wants, and there's a reason why he's not inventing anything on the spot. And again, in contrast to guys like Kaynan or like Cade, it is nice to see on the same card, like the diligence in the gi versus the I'm going to leverage, my extreme athleticism and my awareness of my body and awareness of the game to get things done, versus I'm going to leverage my awareness of like how to use the cloth.
Yeah. And I mean, those were the interesting parts of this match for me. I think the match ends. It's interesting that Zak wins in the end.
Yeah.
There's 2 come-up sweeps, like 50-50 style come-up sweeps after this, so the score is 4-4 on the board. Zak shucks Shane by.
Well, Shane has one ad. So as we sorry, you
go
to
ahead.
the sequence, and then I'll
go.
Basically, it scores. It's Shane's up by 1 advantage as the match finishes, but Zak Kaynan is in the process of what would score an ad, and then my issue with this is it essentially goes to decision, and Kaynan wins the decision, which I don't think is unreasonable. I think it's reasonable, but my annoyance here is that when they still have the scoreboard on the screen, Shane is up.
Yeah,
and then it goes to decision, and Kaynan wins, and it annoys me because, like, as a spectator, had you not seen that, had you not understand that, okay, IBJJF scores advantages for sequences that happen as the match ends, which again is their rule, I at least leave the score up on the board a little longer so that it is very clear what is happening and why it's so actually Jits Magazine here has it Kaynan winning on advantages. I thought it was,
I think they were tied on advantages.
The other
Zak
issue,
got an ad for the almost submission on a straight ankle lock that was kind of questionable.
Yeah,
and was up at the end, I think.
It was the last sequence, the sweep or takedown sequence. But regardless, it ends in a sequence that it scores an advantage for Zak, and then he ends up winning it. I just would prefer, from a broadcast perspective, that they leave that up on the score. They leave it up on the board, so that you can understand why it's going to decision. It's one of the things that I don't love about how the IBJJF does it. I would like to see a better broadcast, like with the names and with the way they present the information. Because one thing I also, for this entire tournament, please, guys, man, don't put the fucking score up until we're sure what the score is.
Oh my God.
It's gotten really bad in the last couple of years, and it seems to be that they were getting very overzealous with putting the points on the board on the broadcast before they are established or they're called back. I just think we need to have, I need to see them up as quickly as we have them and as quickly as they're known, but it is really confusing to have them up and down and off and on and off. It's just...
And sometimes still to the wrong person somehow.
Yeah.
How is that still happening?
For a GP.
For your premier event. How are you still pointing the...
Flow really needs to update it's Flow's graphic. Yeah. Flow really needs to update it. It's been really bad for a very long time, and they just need to use what they use for Who's Number One for all of their premier pro events. Yeah. It's a title card. It's a sequence. It is the worst looking broadcast overlay of any organization that has a broadcast overlay. Yeah. And it really needs to get updated, especially when you're having this caliber of athletes, these caliber of matches on the card. It really kind of detracts from the event. I'm looking at half names and I'm looking at points that are inconsistently scored and taken back, and it just really kind of hampers the broadcast, because all the other things in the broadcast are great. Great athletes, great matchup, great commentary. Yeah. Camera work is pretty good. The lighting is okay nowadays. Yep. But that last bit of broadcast, the pacing was okay.
Pacing was fine.
Watched it after the fact. I would love a little less breaks in the action. I would also love a main card video as opposed to needing to watch the whole event video. Yeah. Just some minor things I would like. I would like Flow to get a little more on top of actually parting these things out and make a way in their search bar to actually search by matches and don't just put the interviews at the top. Maybe deal with some spoilers, so I'm not just opening the app to spoilers.
Give me a tag filter.
A lot of issues with Flow as per usual, but overall, again, I'm really happy with the way the IBJJF Nogi GP ran. Yeah. And I think it was a really interesting event. I'm curious. I hope they won another women's one. This one was great.
Nice. The gi matches here were really exciting, honestly, which was, I liked the gi matches more than the no-gi matches throughout this, which is interesting because it was the Nogi GP. But I thought the gi matches were really exciting, and that's what I would love to see, right? We have ADCC at this point, which is the premier no-gi event, really. That's what we're thinking about as the premier no-gi event. And so a lot of even though I know that this is still an important event, these are still some really good matchups and really good matchups that will land on people's records for the rest of eternity. That said, it's not the same esteem as like the ADCC Worlds and the ADCC events, things like that.
It's an entirely different caliber, but I like.
But for gi, IBJJF is still it. It's
And
still
then World Pro. Yeah.
Yeah, and World Pro. I mean, I still would place IBJJF over World Pro for gi
I think
events.
for the U.S. audience, absolutely. I think
Sure.
as you move more international, I think World Pro has a lot more, and a lot of the international folks I've spoken to, and it maybe has changed in the last couple of years, but
Sure.
a lot of the international folks, World Pro is still very, very highly regarded
Yeah.
because a lot of folks can't get over here, and World Pro is a little easier to get to, I think, internationally.
Sure.
But
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But either way, it's nice to see that the gi events the gi fights here were really exciting because that's where I want to see IBJJF actually like grow in terms of the spectator end of things.
Yep, I would love to see that as well. So overall, good event. I've got nothing else on it. We had a bunch of other colored belt matches. We had Sarah Gaval, Andre Gal's daughter, won on points, really great match. We have Mia Frigetta, I think we're going to see a lot more of, also taking a dominant win in her match. Again, look at the colored belt matches for these folks. These are all folks that you're going to see in the mix in black belt in probably 2 to 3 years maximum.
Yeah.
And they're going to be in the mix in the places at the black belt level. If you're curious, like, who you should keep an eye on, go look at all of these folks in the colored belt matches, especially the winners here. These are your premier younger IBJJF athletes coming up. And so, again, I like that they are showcased. We don't have time to talk about all their matches, but I do appreciate that they are showcasing not only the black belts, but also the diversity of talent across the colored belts as well, because those folks, I think, deserve that and are in those rosters and have been in those organizations for a long time.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
all right, what do you got going on this? Anything else you got on the event? Any thoughts?
Nope, no more thoughts. I think that was a good wrap up.
What's your week look like? Anything fun going on?
No, work.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm going to work. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine though.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some more filming for astrophotography, and then I'll be hopefully getting ready for the eclipse, and that's about all I got.
Psychopath.
All I got going on this week. Got to plan that. We got
Yeah.
our flights for Vegas for ADCC.
You got your moon crystals ready for the eclipse?
I'm ready
You
for it,
gonna-
Zach. I bought solar filter. It was great. We're gonna drive across the country. I got my flights though for ADCC.
Yeah,
I'm
I
excited.
still need to buy my flights, but I got hotel set up at least.
I don't know about those yet.
Oh, I think I actually got an Airbnb in the MGM, which is weird because I didn't know that existed. But
That's
apparently,
a
there's
thing?
apartments there, and you can get an Airbnb in one of those apartments.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, I hope it's
We're
not
gonna
shady.
have a good group. I'm
Yeah, it's
I'm
gonna be
excited
good.
for the folks we have going with it. Grappling Ryan Squad and adjacent friends and folks. It's going to be a really, really good group. The last one we had a bit of a smaller group. This one we really expanded
I
to a
just
lot of
bought-
folks.
I just bought 10 tickets and assumed that they would be taken by someone in our group or a friend
Yeah,
of our group, and
pretty
they were
much.
all gone
And,
immediately.
like, that day.
Yeah, immediately people had claimed.
Yeah, it's like, all right, we're going to Grappling
Theirs.
Rewind. Yep,
Yeah.
Grappling Rewind. Yep, we're going together.
Yeah, so
it'll
it was great.
It'll be a lot of fun. I don't know if I'll be able to make it out to trials because the flights are still astonishingly expensive for the end of the
Yeah.
month, but definitely at the World, so that will be fun. Looking forward to it. Zach, I got nothing else. Anything else?
Nope.
As always in the show, I'm your host, Maine, so the co-host.
Zach.
We are the Grappling Rewind. See that, what it is. Stay safe. If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Google Plus,
Until that shuts down.
we have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
Let us know.
reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.